Welcome to The Peel. I'm your host, Turner Novak, founder of Banana Capital. Today's guests are Doug Song and Jon Oberheide, co-founders of Duo Security. If you've never heard of Duo, it might be one of the most underrated software stories of all time. Starting in 2010, they burned only $14 million to hit $100 million in ARR, were acquired by Cisco for $2.35 billion in 2014, and now we're rumored to be doing over $1 billion ARR inside of Cisco 16 years later. We talk about how they built one of the most capital-efficient SaaS companies ever from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and how their focus on the customer and company culture helped them win in a crowded cybersecurity market. We talk about growing up in the early hacking culture of the 90s, why most security tools are painful to use, sizing their initial market, solving for non-consumption of a product, and how Duo flipped the model by designing for end users instead of security teams. We talk about staying in Michigan instead of moving to Silicon Valley, and why staying out of the tech bubble actually helped them execute better. We break down the mechanics of scaling from 0 to 100 million ARR, everything they learned integrating with Cisco, and why more founders should build outside of San Francisco. A quick thank you to ex-Duo employees Zach Urlacher, Ash Devada, and Katie Kilroy for their help brainstorming topics for the conversation. As a reminder, I publish 2 episodes of The Peel every week, exploring the world's greatest startup stories just like this one. Check out the back catalog of over 100 episodes and tune in over the next few weeks for guests like Gary Tan at YC, Chetan Puttagunta at Benchmark, Jake Stout at Serval, Mike and Nikhil at Footwork, and Scott Stevenson at Spellbook, the fastest growing startup in Canada. Let's talk to Doug and Jon after a quick word from Numeral and Flex. This episode is brought to you by Numeral. Numeral is the fastest, easiest way to stay compliant with US sales tax and global VAT. It's easy to set up, and they automatically handle all registrations, ongoing filings, and their API provides sales tax rates wherever you need them with all the integrations you need. Numeral supports over 2,000 customers in both the US and globally, and they pride themselves on white glove, high-touch customer service. Plus, they guarantee their work, and they'll cover the difference if they mess anything up. They're fresh off a fundraise, closing a $35 million Series B from Mayfield, which they're going to reinvest into building an even better product. If you want to put your sales tax on autopilot, check out Numeral at their new domain, numeral.com. That's numeral.com for the end-to-end platform for sales tax and VAT compliance. This episode is brought to you by Flex. It's the AI-native private bank for business owners. I use Flex personally, and I love it because they use AI to underwrite the cash flow of your business, giving you a real credit line. The best part is 60 days of float, double the industry standard. Flex has all the features you'd expect from a modern financial platform like unlimited cards, expense management, bill pay that syncs with your credit line, and their new consumer card, Flex Elite. Flex Elite is a brand new ramp-like experience for your personal life. A credit card with points, premium perks, concierge services, personal banking, cards and expense management for your family, net worth tracking across public and private assets, and a whole lot more fully integrated with your business spend. One card for your businesses, one card for your personal life, one card for everything. To skip the waitlist, head to flex.one and use my code TURNER to get an additional 100,000 points worth $1,000 after spending your first $10,000 with Flex Elite. That's flex.one and code TURNER for $1,000 on your first $10,000 of spend. Thank you, Flex. And now let's jump in.
I call him Dr. John for what it's worth. You know, he earned it.
The only reason I finished my PhD was because of Doug.
Oh, you actually got a PhD?
Yeah.
That's why I used it,
Come
man.
on. This isn't Dr. Pepper here. Like, I actually,
Is this like on like your LinkedIn? Is it like you like
no,
you want to write PhD?
I was a self-loathing academic, and I never really wanted to go into academia or grad school. But then I was finishing the PhD when we were starting the company, and Doug's like, "No, you need to finish. We need to have someone with a doctor on their business card." And I think I actually put PhD on the business card, which was like completely against all of my beliefs.
But well, like I said, you earned the paper. You deserve it. But it was also, his old advisor, Farnham Johnny, and now president of Carnegie Mellon, was the co-founder and first president of Arbor Networks, right? Where I cut my teeth and where we had first met each other, and so I committed to Farnham. I'll make sure he gets done. Farnham, like it just
it was more for Farnham. Like he had invested a lot. In
you
the degree, yeah. I had to check the box for him.
Yeah.
No, this is kind of a famous story with how you guys first met originally.
Yeah, unofficially met
or unofficially. Yeah,
we weren't actually introduced, but a business in high school. So I was had the entrepreneurship bug very early. And as part of that business, we did, I would say, like very innovative email marketing, if I can put it that way.
Good way to doctor it up.
Yeah, it was, very aggressive outbound email marketing.
Yep.
And my partner in the business and I would drive to Ann Arbor and send massive amounts of email. And we do that from coffee shop, Wi-Fi, Starbucks in Ann Arbor. And one of the times we saw an open access point for Arbor networks. And Doug is a absolute, legend in the cybersecurity space. We're like, oh my gosh, Arbor Networks. It's a company started by Doug Song. He wrote DSNF, all these accolades of your past life on the offensive side of things. And we're like, why would they have an open access point? So we hopped on there. We're poking around. We crept up the back stairwell of the building in order to get a better signal.
Really?
And yeah, we're just like teenagers with our laptops, hacker hoodies on. And Doug walked out down the stairwell and kind of gave us the side eye. And we found out later, supposedly, that was an open honeypot that Doug set up to catch people that were poking around, catch young enterprising hackers. And
my best man, Niels Provost, who, if you look at your SSH man page, it's technical, is an author there along with me. He had written something called Honeydee, which was, honeypot kind of daemon, but software to basically simulate networks or environments in which, attackers would rattle doorknobs, you could catch them. And so, we're part of our playground, right, to kind of experiment with that and see, universities are great places to play with stuff like that.
So did you actually notice it? You got like a notification almost, you just walked outside and we're like, oh, interesting, okay.
Ended up working with Doug at Arbor Networks at that same company.
Yep.
And we got to know each other there, worked on some open source projects together. And then it was, kind of late 2009 when the stars were aligning. I was, late in the PhD program. Doug was finishing up, I think, Barracuda.
Yeah.
At that time, he'd done Arbor, Barracuda, Zatu, another startup.
Mm-hmm.
And, stars kind of aligned to go try to build something together.
But the reality is, like, hackers, when they first meet, they already know each other. They know of each other. It's very rare that you have hackers who have spent any time kind of building stuff. They don't already have sort of a perspective on who each other are and all this kind of thing. So John was already well known, as a student, right, doing all the work he was doing for being a great hacker. So
that was the fun times. I mean, Doug was like deep in the sort of hacking scene in the late 90s. I was a little bit later.
John was breaching the Chinese content firewall.
So what kind of stuff did you do? You alluded to you were on the other side per se. So what was the extent of kind of the hacking that you guys did when you were younger?
Well, my dad had a liquor store, West Baltimore. He had a very early IBM PC 80 and the XT. And so, basic, all that stuff. But yeah, my dad had an early computer to run the store, and that's how I did data entry since I was 8. And so that was my first introduction, pre-internet. BBSs and all that stuff around the time. I grew up, where I grew up was sort of the shadow of the NSA. So a lot of those BBSs were about sort of mass security or they had all these kind of crazy nuclear themes as the 80s, sort of presented.
Yeah.
And then that's, a lot of folks via BBS has found their way to X25. It's all telephony, but the first packet switch networks pre-internet were things like X25, which connected all the banks, right, for bank interchange, all that kind of stuff. So that's where a lot of the boards were. That's where a lot of the hackers were, and that's how I learned. But coming to college, it was amazing to have a 24/7, always on Ethernet connection. That just, was crazy. And so it was a drug. I think I barely left my dorm room my freshman year. I was glued to this thing. And because otherwise it was all dial up, prior. And I fell into some interesting hacking crews. One was called Woo Woo, one that was actually global in nature, founded in the US, but heavy sort of European and some Russian and mostly French sort of influence otherwise. But a lot of those hackers became really interesting people. So, Sean Parker was in it for a bit. The president of Facebook. Sean Fanning, who started Napster, which was a project of Woo, kind of to share kind of MP3s and files. And, Jan Koum, we knew Jan when he was technically on food stamps with his mom, but, just gotten a job in security at Yahoo and ultimately built WhatsApp. So, anyway, it's a long history of some interesting people, a part of that crew that built and broke stuff. And I think anyone good in security does both. You have to. So, and that's how, that's what we tracked Jono. Is Jono was building cool stuff and doing good work as a PhD student, but I had also done all this other stuff. That was really cool.
I think that's the magic of the late 90s and early 2000s in the cybersecurity world at the time. It wasn't really commercialized. It certainly wasn't at the extent of like geopolitical conflict like in the modern day. It was more of the sort of intellectual pursuit of information, solving these really complicated puzzles, understanding how these systems work.
Yeah.
And it was almost kind of like a hippie, cypherpunk, libertarian movement of like freedom of information, and I want control over these systems, and a lot of freedom of exchange of information on mailing lists and IRC channels.
The early open source, movement, Linux and Linus Torvalds as a dictator for life for that, all came out of kind of response, right, to things like the BSD source code. It was technically open source, technically Berkeley and shared it and all that kind of thing, and there were projects like FreeBSD, NetBSD that were kind of organizing kind of developer communities around it. They didn't have open CVS servers. Yeah, you couldn't really. It was still very gate kept, right, in a way that open source after Linux was quite different. And so, and Richard Stallman from the new project at MIT, kind of rewriting kind of all the tools kind of in the modern Unix system that would be the other side of what Linux was, right? As a free operating system, these are all open source hippies and software communists, basically. Mm-hmm. And I count myself as part of that. There was lots of that stuff that I was really deeply into. But yeah, those early days were kind of Wild West. And in security, I remember, it was our friends who built a company called ISS, Internet Security Systems in Atlanta. It was really the first internet security company, but it was all from, and again, I'll go on record on this is stolen source code from a bunch of hackers. Like the hackers who wrote all this stuff saw their work rounded up in a corporate entity that really never asked for permission or licensed it or anything else. And so it's funny. I don't mean to beat up on the ISS guys because, they're friends and I love them, but you go and you saw like the history of the company on, the ground floor of the headquarters, and it's a completely revisionist history, right? Of like how that happened, because it was a bunch of hackers who wrote all the tools that got rounded up, right, as part of that, the initial suite of security testing kind of tools, and never saw anything from it. And so there's some, in security has always been this sort of really difficult love-hate relationship with kind of the industry and security, which is why you have so many people that come into it with a chip on their shoulder looking to prove them wrong. And also because when you're finding these vulnerabilities like Jono did in all these different systems, many of the vendors would just deny it.
Really?
Or threaten you or sue you or, work with law enforcement. Like it was not a bug bounty friendly version of today where, vendors will pay you for reporting bugs to them.
They would sue you.
Yeah.
So like, how did you approach that then? Like, do you just not publicly like disclose the bugs or that was share with them? Or?
That was some of the reason why I ended up in academia. A lot of the research I was doing was, it was independent offensive security research, just pointing out vulnerabilities in various systems. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, the university provided a umbrella or veil
of protection.
Yeah. That, both from the outside world as well as from the university itself. And, I was never in it to become professor, to stay in academia, but it was more of a holding pattern of being able to continue the research that I love to do, have that in some vein of research, of publishing. But more so, it was like our lab at the University of Michigan was more of a startup incubator than anything else. There's a bunch of people sitting around who are really smart. They're on the bleeding edge of their little sliver of the world. And you're sitting around all hours of the day saying, like, what are we doing with our lives? Like, why are we wasting our time publishing these papers? We should be going out, building products, solving interesting problems. And, that research group, it spawned Arbor Networks, which is a great cybersecurity company. It spawned, Twilio, Evan Cook, who's the CTO and founder there, Jeff Lawson, who was from U of M as well. It ended up, creating a lot of interesting startups that kind of sprung out of just the same room.
Yeah, it's one of the things wonderful about a place like University of Michigan, like Ann Arbor, really, because of the University of Michigan, which has the largest research expenditure of any university next to Hopkins. right? So Hopkins is like 3 billion. University of Michigan is about 2.5
What,
annually.
second in the country?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's the largest research expenditure in the nation. And actually, we first, public or private, if you were to back out APL from Johns Hopkins, because I don't think that's really fair.
What is APL?
Applied Physics Lab. So
is it like a government, federal funded type? Okay.
yeah. And so I think, the reality is that, Michigan is a powerhouse of this kind of stuff. And though I was not a good student, I sort of barely got out of undergraduate life. Yeah. I think I got a degree. Yeah. I tell people all the time, like, stay in school. Because whether the paper really matters or not, and I think it does, if your parents are probably paying for it,
Yeah.
It's the access to resources. Like where else? And that's what led me here. Because, I was going to go to school somewhere in the East Coast, but when I explored the University of Michigan network from afar, realized that actually there was this, it was stunning. Like you have, even at that time, the early 90s, had a network that looked like NASA Ames, like the broadest kind of concentration of, broadest diversity of commercial Unix systems I've ever seen. They had supercomputers, right? They had Crays, they had a supercomputing cluster. I was like, what even is this? This is available to students? And so that's actually what led me here.
Yeah, some people pick their school by the academics or the party scene. Doug was like, what has the coolest computers? I'm going there, and I already have access to all of them.
Yeah. And so, I think, we get overlooked for that sometimes because, it's like, oh, Stanford, MIT, Harvard. But actually, the ARPANET, which everyone says, oh, it was birthplace internet and those schools were involved. It was actually the NSFNet, which Michigan was responsible for actually building. We won, the state of Michigan, University of Michigan won the award to build a National Science Foundation network that didn't just connect, like 10 schools like the ARPANET did, but, 400 research universities, right, across the country. And that backbone of research networks and, and computing merged with ARPANET to become the internet. So the birthplace of the internet actually was here. And that's why the North American Network Operators Group is here, right, governing all, inter-domain routing and how networks actually joined the internet, right? That was all governed here out of Ann Arbor. That's why Internet 2 was here. There's a long and deep history of that, plus all the systems research. If you look up any, Unix programming book, Richard Stevens wrote, it's all dedicated to the Michigan Terminal System because it's one of the first timeshare computing platforms in the country. And that's because back in the 40s and 50s, as, over in Bletchley Park on their side of the pond, the Brits were sort of breaking like, U-boat codes and Germans and ciphers and all kinds of stuff. Here, we were computing bomb trajectories. Right? All that was black budget stuff that, just never, people didn't know about. And being Michigan, we never talk about. We're like, we're just too humble. But we built all that stuff here.
Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, I live here. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. The arsenal of democracy people hear about, we built the first tank plant. We built all the bomber, all that kind of stuff. But the other side is all the research. We invented small aperture Doppler radar, holography, all these things that back in the day were all black budget research programs. But, like even a lot of the AI stuff, right? I mean, classic AI, modern AI being what actually would call ML, but, classic AI, all those folks from John Laird and his time at Marvin Minsky and all these folks in MIT, like they built all the first computational model of cognition here. So the SOAR model and some of the early companies like SOARTech that since the 80s have been doing stuff with the intelligence community and DOD. Like we've been doing this stuff here forever and we just never get the credit for it. And so, yeah, I mean, folks like Jono, as sort of like the lineage, right, of that kind of stuff. And we just never really get to do,
Yeah. So is that why you guys always kind of wanted to stay here? Like, did you realize how powerful it was maybe before anyone else did? Or like maybe it was like a subconscious thing? Like it's just, there's no other choice. Like this is just the place.
I think it was a little bit of chip on the shoulder to prove that we could do it.
I mean, John is a Michigander, so he has a little more feel for the place. I mean, to be honest, my first 15 years in Michigan, I never had gone beyond Ann Arbor and Detroit, right? Just go to shows there. I never even been to West Michigan, which has, I mean, some of the most gorgeous beaches in the world. And we have more coastline than Florida and almost as much as Alaska, right? So like people don't realize like Michigan has a lot to offer. I didn't know that. I just kind of learned about this stuff. And what happened was I just met through, I got caught hacking when I was a freshman. I ended up plea bargaining into sort of a long-term role with the university as a security administrator on probation, basically, to work for the university. But through it, I met all these graybeards, like all these hackers who, like Marcus Watts, who built all the Kerberos stuff when he was at MIT and then adapted to AFS here. Like there's so many of these deep folks. Nathaniel Borenstein, who invented MIME, right? MIME is the basic protocol encapsulating documents for the web and for email, right? Or I don't know, some of the most famous, famous is not right the word, but the
X509, Redis, all these core protocols.
Right. Yeah, like X509, LDAP. LDAP was invented by Tim House when he worked at the same research lab as me at Citi. And he was Ben Horowitz's co-founder for LoudCloud. Right? Ben Horowitz's notable experience as, with LoudCloud and HP. And before that, I guess with Netscape technically and AOL, that came from having worked with, Tim House as a co-founder from Michigan. And so anyway, all this stuff, there's all these connections too, but
it just wasn't really negotiable for us though. We're starting the company here. We're building here. We're hiring here. We certainly had challenges in the seed round of, investor interest, or I guess investor questions about why are you staying there? Is this going to be a disadvantage?
Because that kind of the non-negotiable is if you're starting a tech company and you're raising venture capital, you should just move to San Francisco. Like it's almost like part of the term sheet, right? Like they just kind of make you do it.
Yeah, but here's what I'll say about that, right? I mean, because we definitely struggle with, kind of the initial raise as we're kind of going out and figuring out what we do. And we did one Sand Hill Roadshow where my computer ate it halfway through, and so we
ate it.
Yeah, this drive basically died halfway as we're sitting in the parking lot at the new Andreessen Horowitz, which had just been set up.
So Doug is a perfectionist, so we're making like last minute slides, edits on the way in the car, and like pulling up to meet Frank Chen and Andreessen, our first like VC pitch ever, at least in SF, and the hard drive dies, and there's we're gonna have Google Cloud back then or Google Drive. And so we just rolled into the meeting. And actually, I think it worked really well. We could still do a demo. I had some terrible Linux laptops, so I couldn't even like open the slides.
Bill O'Reilly did whatever, like,
we'll do it live. Yeah, like, screw it. It's going to be fine.
Whiteboard and Jono.
We did get a term sheet, some interest from Andreessen, but it was very much like, we would expect you to be out here.
In fact, we would have been their early investments. And this I'll go on the record for as well, because, I just want to give some confidence to other founders, right, to follow their own journey and path and heart. There's something strategic about any place that you'll be and set up, right? Just whether you know how to tap into it or not and make the most of that. And that's your job as an entrepreneur, right? Take the best of what's around you and really, the alchemy of turning that into some unfair advantage. For us, that was Michigan, right, in Ann Arbor, because, between John and I, I built a bunch of companies here. He built all this amazing kind of globally, impactful work, but with a research group that had all been kind of cranking on this stuff in some university lab somewhere, right? And by the time that we got to Andreessen, they were like, going to final partner meeting. We're like, any great technology company you can start in Michigan, but any great technology company has to be in the Valley. And this is after, quite frankly, Ben had tried to recruit me twice. Once to Netscape days, pre-AOL, and second came back with Tim House to try to recruit me for LoudCloud, and picked up my friend instead. And I just never believed that. I just saw all this technical excellence around me, folks that changed the world and, create all this amazing value from here. And I was like, I just don't think that's true. And I also don't, I'll be honest with you, I really didn't like the vibe out there. Mm-hmm. In fact, when we did Arbor Networks, I had gone to try to open an office in Berkeley. We looked at the East Bay, maybe stupidly, but thinking that, it felt most like Ann Arbor, but that's the problem. It was like too much like Ann Arbor. It's like, okay, this is great, but it feels like it's dirtier. It's like a dirtier Ann Arbor, much less convenient, much more socially stratified. And, why would we go through all that trouble when we could just live in Ann Arbor and continue doing it? But that was the consideration for Arbor Networks, because we got the company funded just at the height of the bubble. It was like February 2000, just before the bubble burst in March.
Those were like weeks before, yeah.
Yeah. So it was 10 million, 11 million in a Series A. And then there's the echo boom of the global telecom market imploding. right? And so that all had happened. But in between, I tried to figure out, could we go and build more of a business in the West Coast? When the telecom market imploded, I just moved to New York with my then girlfriend, now wife. And we got a line of business spun up with the banks because the banks always have money. And so we pivoted from kind of doing telecom security to then internal sort of behavioral anomaly detection for banks. And that was very successful. And then we parlayed both into kind of what Arbor ultimately did. But yeah, I mean, at the time, even then, everyone was still looking. Even if that bubble had burst, everyone was waiting for the shoe to drop when rents would fall in the valley. It never really happened. And again, just the thing I didn't like about it, that place was, and again, I love the valley. I love, it's great to visit. It's great, blah, blah, blah. But it's just only about tech. It's tech, blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm just not about that,
I think there's a healthy allergy to the Silicon Valley scene. Like, yes, there's great businesses being built and, a great ecosystem for sure. But there's a lot of folks that we see that are like plain startup. Like they're so busy.
In San Francisco, you mean?
Yeah, so busy. Happy hours, doing panels, doing all tech week parties, the accessories to the startup world as opposed to being focused on building their business.
Entrepreneurs on the startup beauty pageant.
Yeah.
Right. Like doing all these things. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm much rather find the folks that are just building things. That's what I saw in John. I was like just building shit. And it's like amazing. I'm like, dude, like, there's so many people like that here, right? Just heads down, creating and aren't subject to that shiny object syndrome that happens in the valley where everyone's like, oh, what are they doing? What are they doing?
Yeah.
Jumping every 8 months, right? To something else, right?
So it might have started with like the chip on our shoulder, but it led to, I think maybe we backed into the right talent strategy for the business. One is that we had employees that we would invest in them and their growth and their development, and they would invest back in the company and their loyalty and their tenure at the company, where they're not hitting their 1 year one year vesting cliff and then jumping to the next company. They're staying there 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and growing with the company's needs. And it was also the case that, we were trying to build a very different company in the cybersecurity space. So if we went out and we hired all the folks from, Symantec and McAfee and all of the sort of legacy security companies, we would have built the same shitty company those companies were. Instead, we're like, let's hire people with a blank slate that aren't, disillusioned by decades of the cybersecurity space like we had been. And guess what? They're going to come at it from first principles. They're going to talk to customers. They're going to design things and build things in a way that haven't been done before because they don't have that sort of, preconceived notion of how things should be done in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah, they'll bring a different toolbox, expand our toolbox with other things and perspectives, solve problems from, right?
I mean, look at a lot of like the great cybersecurity founders. A lot of them aren't from cybersecurity space. I'm thinking of like, like a Christina from Vanta. Like she was a PM at Dropbox and she understood the value of, design and good user experience. And you can learn security. That's not hard to do. You don't need the decades of cybersecurity experience to solve cybersecurity problems. So when I look at founders now from the investing side, I'm like, are you a good product person? I don't care if you're expert in quantum cryptography or, you did threat hunting at Mandiant. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. It's like, can you build?
But that doesn't mean something to each other. I mean, you still need, but it's almost table stakes, right? You need some technical kind of grounding in, something. But again, it's just those same skill sets are not the same ones that will build a company.
We already had enough of that nerdery between the two of us that we needed, great folks that could do design well, that could build amazing products that, would work 9 to 5 and go home to their families and friends and hobbies and weren't, sure, we were working long hours, but it was not the same as sort of the traditional lean startup valley scene.
996. I think is what they call it.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people that worked a lot and we worked a lot because we loved it. But, that expectation wasn't shared across the team.
Yeah.
Someone else came from me. We had, thankfully had some prior experience having built these other companies with Arbor and so forth to refute sort of that position from folks like Andreessen. We're like, you can only build. I was like, actually, we built Arbor networks here just fine. In fact, the one mistake we made was that we decided that we'd follow our investors to Boston for a company called Arbor Networks after Ann Arbor, obviously. We ended up headquartering in fucking Waltham, Massachusetts. Route 128 out there. It was it was miserable.
Mm.
It was miserable. And I'll just say this. I mean, for any of my Arbor colleagues, I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, we built a business that, we built a business that was successful, but a culture that was so painful that even I didn't want to be part of it. And I was the first one to leave my day job, right? I think, as first-time founders, we didn't know what we were doing. We had not raised venture capital. We had not, built executive teams. So we followed the lead of Battery Ventures, and, Cisco is also an investor. But again, ended up hiring a sort of a rotating door of hired gun CEOs and, go-to-market folks and all the rest. Go-to-market's a little harder not to sort of have that happen at some level. But see, it was very painful. But that whole experience just led me to realize that, you don't have to do it this way. In fact, the kind of compact that John and I had, and then others, like our CFO, when we really started to build a company out, was that we're only going to work with people we want to work with, because life is short. And so much we saw of how these companies went wrong is when, founders didn't really, one, trust their instincts, right? To sort of build the kind of teams and also really focus on kind of building sustainable kind of cultures, like team cultures and teamwork that would actually survive the stress of kind of hyperscale. But the other is that you need to grow as founders.
How did you know when to trust your instinct when you were building Duo? Like, was there a check you guys had, or was it like an instinct on when to trust your instinct versus the playbooks?
I think, and I don't want to speak for Jono, but I was very reluctant CEO. I think at one point John and I were sort of figuring out like who should be. But there were some pretty sad moments where, I can remember the call I had with one CEO who just, before Cloudera, I think Tom had basically exited his prior one. What was it called? The Arc. I'm trying to forget all the name of these companies now. ArcSight. But anyway, he was jumping. I was sad episode. I basically was begging him, please come. Will you be my mommy? Please.
So you're trying to convince him to come and be the CEO.
Yeah, because I was like, I was tired. I was like, I don't think I'm right. And
Doug is a very humble CEO. Like, we would go into every board meeting, like private session, and Doug would just be like, I don't think we're doing a good job. Like, I don't think I'm doing a good job. If you guys need to replace me, let me know. And the board would be like, you guys are crushing it. You just tripled again and you're like cash flow positive. And like, what? Like, no. Like, you're doing great. But I think that almost that attitude is a really healthy one for the company.
And in general, now as an investor on the other side, I don't know if Johnny feels the same way, but I prefer sort of reluctant leadership, right? Yeah. Like, it's a hard job. It's a terrible job, frankly. It's not particularly fun. Like, when people ask me, like, what do you, follow your passions? What do you do for fun? I'm like, I don't know. I'm Asian. Like, I just like I understand how to fulfill my duty, responsibility to my family, my children, my society, whatever. But like, for me, it's more I get gratification of like, delivering the work. But again, there's always that. And I think for both of us, we're trying to figure out like, are we? And we would coach our own team through that too. Like, we need to work to our best and highest purpose by doing the jobs that at each turn we're best and uniquely suited to do. And that changes as the company grows. And every 6 months you look around and half the team is new, right? And so
I think it was consistent that we were always trying to figure out, how do we obsolete ourselves? How do we, delegate more? How do we hang on to the things that we think are really important to hang on to? Like Doug would always say, we're never going to delegate, product, culture, or brand. The product strategy of what we're building, the culture of what we're trying to build internally as a team, and the brand is kind of that external promise to customers. And, people talk about founder mode and like, should I keep everything myself? Should I delegate everything and be a professional manager? And that's just like a misnomer.
Yeah. I don't, when people talk about founder mode or whatever, I don't know. I'm very skeptical. They like to talk about like 996 or like just the operational kind of behavioral profile, but I don't think that's it. I think for me, it's always been more about like, versus the math of the business, the soul of the business. That's what cannot be replaced, right? When founders move on. Very hard to sort of recenter and kind of root the company, because, founders have more of an intuitive sense of why are you doing this at all? Why this exists and what problem you need to solve. sometimes we're often more empathy, right, with the customer because they have some other kind of connection to that, or some experience that led them to solving this suite of problems that gives them the right for those customers to go solve the adjacencies, right?
That's one way I've heard people, when you get into the nuances of founder mode, it's that the founder has so much just earned knowledge over time that they just kind of know what the right decision is.
But you also got to teach that. I mean, if you want to grow, you do have to scale and delegate. There's no getting around that. So if you want to, be the bottleneck for your entire organization, like good luck with that. But if you want to, 3x, 5x, 10x the company, you're not going to survive.
Yeah. For me, founder mode also part of how we thought about, working with the broader team that weren't, obviously not everyone's going to be founder, but everyone's going to be at least some kind of owner, right? Through their equity. But how then do you push decision making down so that people actually behave and are able to act and solve problems as owners? And again, we hired a COO who came from Zendesk and MySQL and before. And, he had a nice way to put it, Zach Urlacher, who has now gone on to do, multiple more unicorns, right? Before and after us. But you talk about pushing decision making down. Like I'm the CEO, I'm the janitor, so is everyone in the company. And so, you have your scope of responsibility, but you have your broader sphere of influence. And so any good executive I've ever worked with is strategic about much more than just their function, how they work with others. But if you push that kind of thinking down to like every employee in the company, then you're not having to say, like if a director or manager or an IC has to like run something up the chain, to the manager, director, VP, C-level to be run back down the other side of it, right? In some other, department. But instead they can just work peer to peer, right? Sales, marketing, figure out kind of the demand gen strategy and get it done. Then all of a sudden you have everyone in the business innovating, right? In every part of it.
Remember one of the lowest moments in tenure at Duo was when I heard through, not a grapevine, but I heard through a secondhand source that someone had said that Doug and John wanted to be this way. And I was like, that is so toxic. That is, first of all, it was completely false. Second of all, like to rely on a higher power of authority for making a decision is like the complete inverse of what we wanted to do. We wanted people closest to the work making those decisions. And that was one thing that Zach was really good at. We'd be having a conversation, a meeting, and someone would be like, well, we could do this, we could do this. And Zach would sit there and say, what should we do?
Yeah. What do you think?
And the person's like, I'm going to make the decision. What do you think we should do? They'd say, we should do A. So we're going to do A. Let's do it.
Yeah. But that's how we end up building. Well, we to do that, we also had to build what we call a culture of learning together, right? Where it's sort of blameless, these decisions, and not about who was right, but what was right. And so it's all this kind of work we did on kind of building a team of that. A lot of it came from the kind of culture that John and I came from, of like open source or academia, where it's like, it's not about kind of pulling a rank on somebody.
Yeah, it's like a high school kid could make a contribution that makes the project better, and it works.
Yeah, and actually, and nobody has time to say like, you were wrong. It's like, well, yeah, I know. I tried, and it didn't work.
What are we going to do about it?
Yeah, and like in academia, no one's doing that. Oh, you were wrong about that research result. Like, you're just figuring it out.
Yeah.
And so, and in academia and open source, the same thing. And so it's really important. So that's, I think probably for both of us, as we think about kind of the kind of companies we back or founders, if there's any wisdom that we try to impart, it's just that, you have to focus on that. And a technology business is still a people business, ultimately. And that's, and so I see the kind of weird escalation of like the founder as God mode or whatever in these kind of, discussions. Recently, it's just like really bad. It's not really how you can achieve scale, I think.
One thing that came up when I was talking to people, just kind of doing some research for this, one thing I thought was interesting, this might not be interesting, but you gave everyone had kind of a personal development plan, kind of like a path to get promoted. Was that an intentional thing of just like...
Yeah, everyone should know, where they're at and what's next for them. And sometimes, the desires and the growth of an employee matches the needs of the company, and that's spectacular. Sometimes it doesn't. So, we had more of kind of your tour of duty, I think, talent philosophy, where it's like you can work here for a few years and we hope you grow with the company. And it was so spectacular to see even some of our executives that started, Chester started as our engineering architect, first engineering manager, first engineering director, and then VP of engineering for kind of the full history of the company.
And one of the best VPs, but one of the best engineering executives I've ever met, right? Like he just Killed it.
So what makes a good engineering executive?
I mean, there's the basic. Well, I'll let you answer, John, because you managed him.
Our VP of engineering, Chester, he built a leadership factory.
Mm-hmm.
So he was producing managers, directors that can be VPs of Eng at any company out there. And team culture, performance, the happiness was always like top of any, function in our organization. And a lot of the practices that he put in place in terms of his managerial culture ended up being adopted by other parts of our organization as well. So it wasn't like he's not leading the product vision. We got enough of that between the two of us. He wasn't, on stage rallying customers, on the front lines of the sales team, but he built incredible sort of delivery platform for our product ambitions.
Unlocking the full human potential, right, of every person in the team in a fractal way, right, where it's just like carries through. And, and that's a remarkable thing, right, where you sort of have built kind of a winning franchise, like, that individual, as U of M like to say, like individual performance leads to team performance leads to program performance, right? But if you're able to really build that kind of culture, that's what carries. And he did a great job of that.
I think those IDPs were just one manifestation or one artifact of a healthy organization. Of if you want to go be a VP of Eng, like we've got Chester, is probably not going to be here, but we're going to help you find your next job. Mm-hmm. Like if it's not a fit here at Duo, we're going to make sure you're successful in your next thing. And when I would try to recruit people, I would say, Duo is an amazing place to work, but my hope is that Duo is like the springboard. When you're looking back on your career, 20, 30, 40 years from now, you look back and you say, that was the role where, I learned the most. We grew the fastest. I worked with the best people. I had some amazing experience that allowed me to jump to the next thing, like a new sort of inflection point in my career arc.
We want to do it to be the best company to be from, right? Mm. The way that, like Jono and U of M and all this stuff, right? There's a heritage, there's legacy, something it means to be from Michigan, right? In this way. But also, from the open source community, right? Like where everyone's a volunteer, you can't tell them what to do. It's sort of like, well, how do you manage sort of teams, distributed teams, and something where, like, again, you can't tell people what to do. You sort of have to inspire their work in alignment towards to accomplish something larger than themselves, but without the command and control sort of orchestration, right? Because that doesn't scale anyway. That's also not how you get the best work out of people, right? You need them to come up with their own agency. And so yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that just, at a very corporate level, at a very executive level, it's like, most CEOs with their executives will have something of a career contract. Come join me for the next 2 to 4 years. Mm-hmm. What are the kind of things you're trying to accomplish in your life or career? I want to do this. I want to have a family. I want to learn how to be a CMO. I want to make $40 million. And like all these things were things that, we had to fulfill for folks at Duo. But it goes down the line, right? Like, cause I personally, as a open source kind of hippie guy, right? Growing up in those kind of teams, I was like, I don't know how to motivate anybody to do anything. I think people have their own intrinsic motivations for life or career. And as leaders, our job is simply to understand that. Like, what do they want to do? And then how do our needs present as opportunities for them? Because if they can fulfill those, right, kind of, at our organization, then we're both getting what we want until such time as we diverge. And when that happens, that's fine. We've had people who we hired, I think, 3 times.
A lot of boomerangs, yeah.
As they started other companies, as they made fortunes in Bitcoin, and still came back to work for us. It's like, it's funny. We had all kinds of folks that were so loyal to the program and so invested in kind of how we're operating. So I'm just proud of the fact that we have so many Duo folks that have gone on and recombined to start their own companies and their own journeys that way.
We're still there within Cisco.
Yeah, yep.
Actually, it might be interesting. I don't know if you've ever actually, like, what is Duo for just someone who's been listening to this for like an hour? Like, what are you talking about?
In the cybersecurity space, we love our acronyms, right? We love TLA. So there's like, MFA, multi-factor authentication, SSO, single sign-on. We come up with new words like Zero Trust or Beyond Corp. But Duo, fundamentally, we allow end users, mostly employees, to get access to their, corporate applications that they need in a safe, secure, usable way. That's kind of the end user value. And then we do that via all this industry jargon, making sure that you are who you say you are, making sure you can have a secure device to access those applications and so on.
But we critically, we do it by making it easier do things, not harder. Where most security is really about putting hurdles in front of people to jump through. And of course, most people understand Duo as like two-factor, which is like, oh, there's a second thing to do. But also there's a password list. There's the, things that we have really pioneered, right, with a lot of folks to do, so you don't have to really worry about logging, but maybe once a month. And we were able to, enable organizations to do that with even untrusted devices, right? But maybe trustworthy if we can kind of verify them, but kind of make access easier and simplify that for organizations.
I mean, our slogan early on was like, security sucks. Like, who has time for this? And
yeah, we never really used that as marketing, but but internally.
Like when, you've used security products sometime in your life, like when has that ever been a good experience?
It's like, I think of it as being a nuisance that like I have to figure out this secure thing to like be more secure, and I'll figure it out next week.
Has there ever been a security product that is like, Turner, you're doing a good job? No, it's like, Turner, you're terrible at computing. Like, don't click those links. Don't open that attachment. Why did you do that? And you're like, I don't know. I'm just trying to use the computer, right? I'm trying to like browse the internet and it's telling me I'm a bad person. Right. And that was most people's end users' experience with security. It's always telling them when they're doing something wrong or unsafe or putting something at risk. And so we had that challenge and opportunity of like, how do we make security not so painful that maybe it could be a semi-positive experience? Like there's a reason why Duo's logo is green. It's like, we want to let you in. Like we want to get out of your way.
Green means go.
As quick as we can so you can do your job. Like no one wants to jump through the hoops. They just want to share a file or they just want to log into Slack or whatever it might be.
Like 99.9999% of the people that are logging in are just like trying to do the thing that needs to be done. And then
they're trying to be like
small
good employees.
Yeah,
good employees. But then you got to plan for the worst case when it's a bad guy that's trying to get in.
Yeah. So this was kind of a key insight for us, was, and this is, kind of trite or a cliche in the wake of Steve Jobs, and Apple, but, better security by design, right? And the way we thought about this was really that security engineering and design engineering are just two sides of the same coin. How do you make the right things happen by default, right? Where typically people think of security and design as being opposite, right? Design about saying yes, security by saying no. They're like, no, actually, there's an intersection of this, right? Where, between people and technology, proper design and security engineering can actually streamline things to make things safe, easier, more effective. And so that was always our goal. Our mission as a company was to, make security easy and effective for everybody.
I think typically, the cybersecurity startup in the world would, they'd raise some money. Their first go-to-market hires would be like 3 enterprise AEs in New York, and they'd sell to a bunch of banks and Fortune 500. And that would be it. And we started the exact opposite. We were like, we are starting down market with VSB and SMB, and we're going to work our way up over time with product maturity. And that's unusual to have a product, an offering that meets a market need and can be consumed, purchased, deployed, managed, used by companies that are like a mom and pop coffee shop that have a PCI compliance burden because they accept credit cards, all the way to your Fortune 50, federal government, your most sophisticated and sizable customers.
So why did you
the same, same thing? They're using the same product.
Yeah. Well, so why did you start there? Because like the 101 would be like, oh, hire the AEs, go to New York, sell the banks.
Well, so in point of fact, we didn't actually start there. We end up there.
Yeah. So like, what was like the seeds of Duo getting started? I know there was like a document you showed me of like all these ideas you had of like when you first started it.
Right. Because I think, we had seen the shift in MO of attackers. Security had become everyone's problem as kind of the internet, particularly via SaaS, had kind of widened kind of the attack surface for many more organizations. And we were seeing, not just the banks, hospitals, governments being attacked, but the smaller businesses, auto body shops getting fleeced for $3 million, all that kind of stuff. And their banks actually disavowing kind of any responsibility. Like, well, really? Sorry, you got hacked and that's not our fault. And in point of fact, there's a case here in Michigan called Experimental versus Comerica, where that's what happened. And the customer had an RSA token, a two-factor authentication hardware token, used it. But of course, the attacker, they captured the first password, but they were in line, could capture the second one and to replay that in the same time frame. And so, the bank was doing all the things that they could do in the market to solve that problem. And yet the customer still got hacked. So whose fault was it? And so we looked at this thing, and quite frankly, by that time I had left security. I'd gone to go to Internet TV And that was,
I remember. Was that too?
Zatu, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe the only thing more ill-advised at the time than security. But, with the rise of YouTube and all, Zatu was fine. They're a great company, doing well, and pioneered all kinds of interesting things. But it was a peer-to-peer video company trying to atone for my sins, right? With what we had done with Woo and Napster. But that all said, we kind of came hesitating because when we started the company, and I was telling John, hey, let's go build the next great security company. So, well, what are we going to do? I was like, I don't know. Like we're going to, but what I do know is that there's something happening that we need to go talk to kind of customers and other folks about. So actually one of our very first meetings, we drove, I think, to New York City, and we met with my old customers at Goldman Sachs and Citibank, have them tell us, Byron Colley, who leads FSISAC, the, financial services industry incident sharing and analysis center, what they were seeing. And the messaging was consistent across like all these banks and also big tech, account takeover. They just couldn't deal with the flood of compromised accounts that was happening because attackers had figured out, rather than trying to, penetrate the firewall, rather than trying to hack this machine or compromise the application, they just phished the user.
And then you could do anything once you got inside.
Yeah, it's like the Ocean's 11 or whatever, you wear the janitor's uniform and you just roam the casino, right?
Yeah.
You're supposed to be there.
Because you just look like a normal user. Like, oh, this guy Ginny from accounting is just
full access to whatever they should have. Yeah.
And you bypass all the security investment that was made, right? To slow them down because, you're the user, you're the employee.
And it probably got even worse. I think you were telling me a couple months ago at the event at Michigan, it was like the cloud was kind of accelerating this, mobile, everyone had a phone. So this was all just like exponentially getting worse.
This was, late 2009. So, the iPhone had been released in 2007, first Android phone in 2008. AWS was a thing, but it was just, EC2 and S3 and still pretty immature. I think Office 365 was in beta still at that time. And so there was this explosion of cloud and mobility that happened over that next decade. And Duo was a benefactor of that, both from leveraging those technologies to deploy a cloud-delivered, mobile-first authentication experience, but more so solving those security problems that were introduced by, this proliferation of SaaS applications and BYOD devices through an organization.
But it wasn't obvious at the time. I mean, at 2009, when we were there and, we're sleeping on my friend Jenny's floor in Brooklyn and going to, Jersey City, go meet all these folks and all this stuff. I didn't have an iPhone. I was like, I think it's a fad. And I don't know if anyone's going to buy that thing. I'm not using it. I'm a security. I'm a paranoid. Like I don't trust that thing.
You had your Razor flip phone.
Yeah, forever.
I held out. Yeah.
But Jono, part of his PhD had been security for cloud delivered security, right? He'd done all this. He'd hacked all these other kind of things, right? Like, I just find the papers now. It's not private, but like he hacked like all these cloud antivirus systems at Barracuda. My old employer had done all this stuff. And so seeing all that and knowing that, he was actually doing a bunch of mobile security research and all this kind of stuff, I was like, interesting, and of course, there were a lot of points along the way where we really got challenged on the delivery of that because we're like, well, should we start with up market, right? And then, because it gets, based on security, it's hard. If you have even halfway decent technology or product, it's hard not to get to like 10 million in revenue. Maybe it's overstating it, but the banks will pay for all kinds of paid pilots, right? In security, for
maybe $100K to run a paid pilot.
Yeah, and so it was maybe the easiest sledding for us to go, but we sort of had a different discipline to say, well, no, we really want to solve for a different end of the market. And my experience from Arbor had been, if we only work with those kind of large enterprise customers, we're going to end up building a Citibank product, a Goldman Sachs product, and all this kind of, because I did that at Arbor. We ended up with like an AT&T product, a Deutsche Telekom product, a British Telecom product. And I was like, we just can't do that. We need to build something different to achieve sort of a mass market sort of adoption. And
like, how do you build sophisticated technology? Like, how do you build power tools that your 3-year-old can use? Like it has to work. It has to be sophisticated, but like, the kids got to be able to use it. And that was, our first few customers were spanning that spectrum. It was a COPCP, Central Ohio Primary Care Physicians.
That was the first customer, right?
Yeah. A bunch of doctors that I think the CISO over there said the doctors their desired technology experience is for them to walk up to a computer and have it recognize how important they are. Like that, you could not,
out of the way.
Yeah, you could not piss them off or get in their way of patient care. Like that's what they live for.
Yeah.
Second customer, I think, was Facebook, which was the whole other end of the sophistication spectrum.
Oh,
and the third customer was the Sioux tribe of Michigan.
Yeah.
So it was like
the three opposite
Yeah,
directions.
yeah. But it was an interesting set.
Yeah. I'm not sure Facebook was the second, but
They were early.
They were early. But yeah, it was a sort of funny experience, right? Trying to build more of a bottom-up motion like I'd seen some other companies do. Because, I come from Barracuda where, they had worked to democratize security in a different way, selling a $2,500 kind of email appliance versus like, $25,000 kind of like whatever, Blue Coat or whatever. And so, so they had kind of built a very different model downstream. And by the way, I'll give Barracuda the credit for all this because before then, there were no tech billboards or airport advertisements. Right? At Barracuda were like these small ISP guys who just figured out, and so they were doing funny things. They were taking out radio spots. They were driving around cars. When I worked for them, I would drive a car that they had, a wrapped car, like I'm working for Molly Maid, So it's so funny, but it worked because they knew their customer. They knew the small kind of ISP kind of customer, and so anyway, so these are all things we're sort of taking into kind of our strategy, implicitly for Duo as you thought about kind of how we go about it and who we want to serve. But long story short, probably the most important thing that rooted us in our work, even those early days, our North Star was who we wanted to serve. That we knew that, yes, they're like, we will have to serve like, enterprise customer and all the rest. But at the end of the day, if we couldn't innovate security in the end of the market where no one really had, around the mid-market and particularly SMB, we weren't solving the problem because that's what attackers were doing.
Yeah, it almost seems like your customer wasn't actually the security team, like, or your end user. Like maybe the security team paid for it, but the end user was like
normal employees. Just want to do their job.
Yeah.
And that's what we had to design for. It was not for the sysadmin or the security director. It was for the people that just want to log in and be productive. And that was, all the things that as we started down market that like forced us to build the power tool for the 3-year-old, make it really seamless, easy for the end user. Like every employee, whether you're in a small organization or a big organization, is going to appreciate that. So it was much easier to kind of go upstream with a product that might have started down market. It adds some bells and whistles, but this was also the era of like consumerization of SaaS, where the way people, found and tried and procured software dramatically changed from like traditional enterprise procurement to I want to go kick the tires on, box trial or something like that. So having that freemium trial experience where people could just sign up off the website, they don't have to talk to a sales rep. If they want to buy it, they can plug in a credit card. That was not new in the SaaS world, but that was brand new in security. Security had not been sort of delivered and sold in that way.
Yeah, even by the time we sold 8 years later to Cisco security still wasn't really able to accept the credit card.
Yeah.
To accept for product purchase online, and that I don't know if I should be sharing this, but anyway.
No one's listening anymore. We're an hour in. No one's going to hear this.
Yeah, but turning up a new customer for a sign up for Cisco's other SaaS security products online meant that someone from accounting was sending a spreadsheet over to the engineering team with a list of accounts that were going to turn up. I'm like, this is insane. Like, what even is this? Right? Like, how is it your assets and entitlements and all the kind of spin up of this, like this manual process and like passing around Microsoft documents? Like, this is like the antithesis of like SaaS, right?
Yeah.
Which is why we end up spending so much time replatforming Cisco on like our SaaS kind of stuff. But I'll say this, that commitment to sort of being thoughtful about how to solve the broad, not just the actual technology problem we're solving, but the broader business problem. The actual problem we were solving was the non-consumption of security.
Oh, like just getting the average employee to just care about it, like use it.
Yeah, or giving smaller businesses or organizations or organizations at scale, like it was kind of funny, but our healthcare was our first customer, but our other largest verticals early for many years were at opposite end of the spectrum. It was high tech, like Facebook, Twitter, Uber, these kind of companies, and higher ed, universities. in the early case, in both cases, they have like large kind of pools of users and stuff. If to deploy security to, simply, effectively, fast. But in one case, particularly the higher ed case, they don't have the budget to do it, right? They're not going to staff out like security teams, all that stuff. How do you empower those kind of organizations to do this stuff at scale? But it was really trying to think about, how do we reshape sort of kind of the opportunity in the market for security to be actually bought and sold for organizations that don't buy security.
Which is why all the, traditional early stage startup TAM calculations are nonsensical. Because the TAM that existed was like mostly RSA and it was mostly large enterprise customers, and didn't take into account that this need existed throughout the entire sort of spectrum of SMB, mid-market, enterprise. There was just never a product that could be built and designed that is amenable to deployment in those small organizations. They were certainly getting attacked and phished. And
would you remember what like the TAM number was in then that pitch deck, that first deck you had?
It was smaller than what we sold Duo for.
Yeah, I think it was around $2 billion.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I guess what I'd say is this, that's where now as investors on their side, where we probably both look at this, right? But like, I don't know. I just feel like the business school exercises of like, estimating kind of the TAM and SAM for these brand new businesses is like, if you're building something really of value, you're either reshaping or you're creating a market for it in some way, right? There's it's inevitable if you're doing something that's really different that no one's done before, right? Otherwise, it's just incremental and someone else, it's just a product feature set for something else are doing. So,
and if you see a pitch deck, you don't need to see a TAM side. Whether it's a big crazy opportunity or if it's like this is feature, not a company. Like it's clear from the pitch that this is a small market. You don't need to size it for me.
Well, so maybe that's an interesting question because didn't Microsoft kind of have like a identity login thing?
Yeah.
Like, couldn't someone say, "Oh, Duo, this is just like a feature of Microsoft"?
Microsoft bought one of our competitors, Phone Factor, and baked it into their sort of Azure MFA platform. We had a lot of that over the years. Google Authenticator was released by Google for login to your Google account, but also any.
I actually used that app. Yeah.
Yeah. And
can I use the Duo app for that also? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that app was written by our friend Steve Weiss, who, were at Google, who we later pulled out to go to his company with other friends of ours from WooWoo that they sold to Facebook. So, there's all these kind of things that they're happening where, like all of our friends who have been building these, it's like, these aren't new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
The big difference is that it's not about the idea. It's about, can you actually build and execute, again, a go-to-market motion, build kind of an onboarding, build the kind of product experience that leads those customers to be successful, doing this almost in spite of themselves and in spite of, certainly in spite of the existing market, because none of the security technology that are out there, this is an old idea, two-factor and all these things that existed for like 30 years.
Even our like amazing innovations, our, world-changing patent innovations. We built a mobile app that has a green button and a red button. You log in, it sends a notification to your phone. You tap the green button to log in. Like not exactly.
And you tap red if it's not you.
Yeah, not exactly rocket surgery.
Well, it was funny to say by the author of like our 100+ patents, but but it's true, right? Underlying it, there's like a lot of
you can Claude code that up in like 10 minutes today. It's not the software components that made us successful or not, but it was the delivery, design,
and the empathy for the customer and the culture we built for a team that's solving every problem for them from that perspective, right?
Remember at the time we launched that app and we were really careful about it. We were worried like someone's going to see it and copy it. And we're like, okay, it probably gives us 6 months of a head start on our competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And, in true sort of incumbent startup fashion, it took RSA, which was our primary competitor at the time, it took them like 6 years to build an equivalent app, and it was still a way worse experience. Like they're locked into legacy architectures and just business processes that couldn't adapt. So it was a good reminder. And going into Cisco, you see how the megacorps work and why, the startup ecosystem delivers as it does.
Yeah, but being radical advocates for your customer, really interpret. I mean, every employee, every engineer at Duo had been in some customer call, right? Because we had a whole system by which you could sign up and join on, a customer call, a sales call that's happening. But everyone had their favorite customer stories. We had customers at every event we were doing, right? Every all hands or, kickoff we're doing, we had customers there. That's the only thing that matters, right? Like, I just think people lose sight of what it means to build a business sometimes when there's so much money floating around and everyone's, figuring out like, what do I do with this kind of crazy technology or capability? when really it's you have customers who have real pain and real budgets, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all, and they need a solution that you could, as engineers, we can solve anything. It's just a matter of like figuring out, can we organize ourselves and teams to go after it?
I think that was the Michigan advantage of like we were heads down in Michigan, outside of the noise of the Valley, where we could focus on building great product, great company, great customer experience, and just not as many distractions as we could. We could really, as Doug would say, get big before we got loud, like prove out the business, show our metrics before making a big deal about it externally. We were a little under the radar.
And for good reason also. Like, Michigan was our secret weapon, and we kept it secret actually for a while. Like, we never really talked about the fact that, we never had problems hiring engineers. I mean, obviously John O and Chester and the team did a lot of work to get, really great people on board. But by and large, we hired whoever we wanted to in engineering and didn't necessarily have to go to the engineers to find them. We have like amazing talent here, and there have been not just universities and so forth, but the history of all these other startups before us that had some experience and so forth. And of course, our networks, right, from open source, from hacking and so forth. And so again, this was a wonderful place to build, because when the average home price, and they climbed here, right? Now it's like, oh my God, it's so expensive. $400,000, right? Median home price, right? In Ann Arbor, which is the most expensive real estate market in Michigan. I mean, it's flooring. My friends who were moving from Detroit, setting up their companies with us here and so forth, they're like, wait a second, like I'm paying more for like this giant mansion, and in my factory, than I sold my tiny little like ranch house right in Mountain View for. And so it's just there's this real comparative advantage, right, and all this kind of thing, if you're willing to get over sort of the buzzy, you got to be here and blah blah blah. Because I said, like we said, we need to have a little bit of Silicon Valley in us, but we don't need to be in Silicon Valley. And our choice of investors reflected that. A little bit from True, our seed investors, Google Ventures, Benchmark. These were all sort of, our route into talent, into perspective, and the Valley that would merge with our own, but not supersede it.
I remember Matt Kohler, who is our board member from Benchmark. He came to a company kickoff and talked in front of the company and described me Benchmark like we invest only in, Series A companies in San Francisco. And then he'd be like, and Ann Arbor. It was like...
and the B round in Duo.
yeah, the B round. Yeah.
Maybe your B round was like valued like an A.
No, I mean, I always tell founders nowadays, people are like super dilution sensitive. They're worried about, post money and stuff. And I'm like, we sold 25% of the company for $1 million. And then we sold another 25% of the company for $5 million. Then we sold another 25% of the company for $13 million. Like,
not that much, but
not me. It may be more like, 20 option pool, whatever.
Yeah.
But our first round, our seed round from True, and I give a lot of credit to Puneet for really taking the risk and making the bet. All the subsequent rounds where like you just show the graphs and things are going pretty great. They took the most risk, but it was a 1-on-4 post.
Right.
That was like our B round is what normal seed rounds are.
An incubation.
Or now. Yeah.
You're leaving the big corporation.
And we had customers, we had some revenue, we had a product, but that was the market back in, 2010, if you can believe that.
I think one thing that you guys definitely did a really good job was like the brand and the marketing. Like, what's the importance of that? Like, what all went into that? Because you said it was green logo. Like, there's
Yeah.
It makes me think of like, I don't know, maybe money, go.
Yeah.
More to go than money.
Or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking of like, green is not a security color.
No, everything's like red and black and scary. And you go to the convention halls and there's banners everywhere of, it's not a matter of if, but when, the attack is already in. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And we're like, this is nonsense. This is like super defeatist and negative. And I think, it was deep customer empathy. We would tell the stories of our customers' challenges and plights. And there's one that we would tell in every onboarding that we called the Duo Pizza Play, where when there's a breach that happens, a CISO is running around, their hair is on fire, they're trying to respond to this breach. Maybe it got leaked in the news and they're dealing with,
just like
PR
a lot of,
response. Yeah, their executives are like, what happened? What's going on? What's affected? You know what happens in that situation? BDRs from every security startup find that CISO cell phone number and they call them. And they say, if only you had bought our product, this wouldn't have happened. And it's like, is that what the CISO needs? Especially at that moment in time? It's like, I don't think so. Like, that's very obvious. You take half a second to think about it.
Yeah.
So one of our sales plays was we would send pizza to the company HQ. We just order pizzas, maybe some like Red Bull or 5 Hour Energy, and say, like, with a card that's like, so sorry this is happening. Like, hope this is helpful. Give us a call when you come up for air.
Yeah.
And the love, the credibility that engendered, where people are like, this is the first time any vendor has actually done something like remotely net positive for me in a crisis situation. And that doesn't happen unless you truly understand like what's happening.
What is your customer actually going
through? It's not rocket science, but it's just like good fundamentals.
People do tabletop exercises, but you know that you're gonna have pizza when you're working late night, right? Getting this stuff done and all this kind of stuff, and just one less thing to think about. But it's also Michigan's a pizza state, so I'm sure that has something to do with it. Actually, one of our first sort of funny experiments with this stuff was a pizza, your pizza script, John. Pizza bot calling up Domino's Pizza to order us using Twilio to order us pizza, but we were, before Domino's had their online ordering and stuff, we basically hacked our own.
Like, you made an online order because the bot would call and place it?
Right.
Yeah. Not even an online order, just on phone.
On phone.
Order.
Okay.
Yeah. It was not very good. We didn't have LLMs back then, but
yeah.
It was like I remember there, we had an employee who worked at another company that had gotten breached. And when he heard news of the breach, the first thing he did, he's like, I went and I bought a sleeping bag from like Home Depot. That was his first actions. I need to get a sleeping bag, because I'm going to be responding to this at the office for like the next 3 weeks straight. And I'm going to be sleeping here. So I need a sleeping bag. And it's like, if you understand like the situation that customers or responders are in, you'll do things different as a company.
Yeah.
And as the company grows and we're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 people, it's hard to scale that industry knowledge, that empathy. But if we told a story like that in onboarding, every time there's a new set of hires that came in, they heard that story. They didn't know exactly how to operate when they cold call a customer or when they're on a CS, renewal call, but they knew that story and they could kind of emulate, like, how should I be interacting with customers? How should I be treating them? They're coming up for renewal and they missed a renewal date. Should I turn their service off? No, why would you do that? Like, give customers some grace. Like, they're working in complicated environments.
So we had personas, as many people will do, for users or the product, but in our case, we them for the customer. And and just like in sales, people will do the kind of enterprise mapping of like who can veto the deal versus who can approve it and all that kind of things. But in our case, we had to think about who will operate this thing. What's going to be the impact of, again, how security is actually managed, right? And how can we ultimately support all that, right? Including some of the features that we had in the product that were overlapping or would be other entire product suites. But because we could see every product that, every device that people were logging in with, we could show kind of a full inventory, right, of all that. Here's all the devices, right, they're being used, right, in your environment to log in. And here's what they're running. And here's what their security profile looks like. That was just kind of, a whole set of IT asset management kind of capabilities that we could also round up as part of our product and have as the integrated context for what people would normally have to figure out when they're dealing with these kind of things, responding and so forth. And so anyway, at the end of the day, John says we work really hard to build this kind of customer kind of culture, right, within the business. But, to your point earlier about, marketing and positioning, the green, the name Duo, like none of that was from the start, right? We started with red and black. We started with a name called cybersecurity, which is a terrible name. But I brought on board a friend who was first an advisor, later came in as our creative director, Pete Baker, who now did Anthropic, right? So he did all of Anthropic stuff. That was pretty good, of all the AI, platforms. It's most
they've had a good run.
Yeah, it's not bad. He also did Tesla. He also did Cliff Bar. He did some other things before Duo. And we specifically gave him the directive, John, right? Like, do not do anything with like do not do anything with like keys and shields, do nothing. And of course, he proceeded to do those things early. But he also took us through the process of like, of branding, thinking about this stuff in ways that would have a broader sort of appeal, broader impact, more accessible. You were like, please not know to anything. And cybersecurity means in Latin, I know security, but who cares? It doesn't matter. It was also based off of Scioto Township right outside Ann Arbor. Doesn't matter. And he was like, no, Duo, because, dual factor authentication, all these kind of things.
I didn't knew that.
But and also the duo or duality of security and design, right? These kind of things. So there's all kinds of, brand potential and all this stuff. But, part of it was also for John and I, having been at these other companies, just not wanting to repeat all their mistakes. So I guess they were just not inspiring in a way that we need to be inspired. One thing I appreciate about John and getting to know him better beyond his hacking was that he was also a rap fan, and
like East Coast hip hop.
Yeah, good. And, the 90s hip hop, which is the best and golden era of hip hop. And, and as a skateboarder, I was like, I told Pete, I want to build something that's, that sort of legacy brand and,
I think your goal for Duo's brand was like, be the best, like skateboard brand. Like that was,
and
aspiration.
And now we actually have a skateboard company.
But you were just saying.
But I think they're like, if you could ask pretty much any employee at Duo, like describe the customer journey, like describe all the touch points, not just the end user perspective, but describe how they work through our sales team, through marketing, through procurement, through legal. And we had just interesting sort of experiences where there's one point where our legal team instructed our engineering team to remove the EULA. We had to click through EULA, you install a mobile app, there's an end user license agreement, and you click accept, right? And our legal team was like, we should remove that from the mobile app. And the engineering team was like, why? Like, this is like a legal thing. It's supposed to like cover our ass if, the app causes your phone to explode or whatever it might be. Legal team was like, well, first of all, these like click wrap agreements aren't actually enforceable. And it makes the user experience painful. Like we know there's like support requests that come in where people are like, I don't want to accept this. I'm, not going to use the app. And to have a legal function that's thinking about that customer user journey is, it's remarkable.
Yeah, legal would be the only department that knows you don't actually need that.
Yeah.
Like everyone else, like, oh, of course we need this.
Or how that legal team can design a customer contracting process that works for, negotiating one-off customer paper agreements where they've got, negotiate and close 10, enterprise deals per quarter, but then also design a process that allows us to close 1,000, SMB customers per quarter. So every function in the organization had to figure out how to, design and service both this low end of the market, high volume, transactional business, as well as the more sort of typical upmarket enterprise.
Speaking about legal, someone told me,
oh boy,
the first expansion into Europe in the Middle East, semi-related, maybe not.
Who told you that? Sorry. Who told you it went bad? Okay.
There's actually two people that brought it up. So what was it like trying to expand into Europe and the Middle East?
I think, there were a lot of things in our Duo experience where they went really well. And I always think of the late Daniel Kahneman, who said, success is talent plus luck, and great success is a little bit more talent and a lot more luck. And like we had, as a business, we had so many tailwinds. I like to think that we built an amazing product, amazing SaaS transactional model, but we had the tailwinds of cloud adoption, of mobility, just these massive industry drivers that if we were bad at everything, we might have still done okay. But I think, hopefully doing things better than bad made us more successful.
Yeah. But I guess we'll say with this, I mean, there was an incumbent market that was not very forward thinking and never would have gotten, in my opinion, to some of the scale that we had. Because at the same time, we had to engineer our luck, right? Like there were points at which there was a customer who came at us and offered us just like but when we were very small, they were offering basically double our entire annual revenue with a single deal if we would put our product in a box and have it on premises stuff.
Okay.
Gavin Belson, like, can you just put it in the box?
And we ran a whole exercise, quite frankly. We ran through a kind of design treatment, kind of like, well, what would it look like?
Built a beta,
Yeah, we ran through this thing. until we had sort of board meeting, and our independent board member at the time, Stratton Sklavos, who was the former CEO of VeriSign, but also was on Intuit's board and Juniper's board, Salesforce's board. He left Intuit's board, joined ours. But he was like, wait, Doug, like, don't do that. And we're like, wait, Stratton, but like, don't we want to double the revenue of the company with, big enterprise, referenceable company? Like, he's like, you built this company with a vision and a commitment to, a vision of kind of leveraging John O's and like, security from the cloud. And like, why would you just stick to your knitting? Because he said, it was very remarkable. It was remarkable to me. He said, the last guy to tell me give me this story was Mark Benioff sitting in that same chair in his office. They're like, Mark Benioff said the same shit to me. I need to put Salesforce in a box. And he said the same thing at the time. Do not do that. He said, follow your gut, follow your intuition, stick to your, have the conviction, right, to follow through and the courage to do something different, because everyone's seen that. You guys are doing something different. And you have customers that have demonstrated that it's possible to deliver in that way.
That same customer also said, we're on BlackBerry and we would never adopt the iPhone. So,
yeah. And so
Morgan Stanley.
Yeah. And so Stratton's advice was, again, skate to where the puck's going on stuff. But he said, you are building the future, right? Don't let the past hold you hostage. And so, it was. I mean, one of the most impactful sort of things that Stratton had done for us, right, and sort of giving us the courage to go after that,
which was not trivial. It was, our organization is going to outsource their most sensitive, from a security and availability perspective, authentication process to a third-party cloud service. This was, the cloud was not proven, and this was a high-risk bet. But I preface that with like, Duo did a lot of things well. We had a lot of success.
Yeah.
Even the things that did not go as great as we hoped, there, you kind of rose-tinted glasses in hindsight. You're like, well, it didn't sink the company, but we certainly could have done a better job. And I think, our EMEA expansion, now when I work with companies that are considering international expansion, I always encourage them. The culture and institutional knowledge transfer is so huge. And I think that's a place where we missed. We spun up teams in EMEA that had no experience with Duo, no connection. You're literally across the ocean. That made it more challenging.
So it's just like a mercenary, like go sell this.
Well, not quite that bad. But we did have a guy who went there for a year, Patrick Garrity, who was about as culture carrier you can imagine.
That was helpful. We needed to transplant that culture of knowledge.
But there were things that didn't translate, right? Because the U.S. market for security is not sold the same way as in Europe, right? Europe is basically all through distributors, right? Resellers. U.S. has a lot of resellers as well, but there it's more of a two-tier distribution system. And so again, there's just more things. And it's a highly fragmented market and all this sort of stuff. And it requires localization, and sort of markets, and different from the cloud. There's even more sort of regulatory stuff. So there's just a lot to work through. And it just took us longer to kind of get through it all. But ultimately, we had,
slower start. New line of business, new region, and the rest of the business just kicking butt. Like the rest of the business is, 200%, 300% year-over-year growth. Yeah. You start this new thing and you're like, all right, we expect it to like at least keep up with the same growth rate. It's smaller, it should grow. And it's like, sometimes your expectations are misplaced and it takes longer for that ramp to start.
But I think one way to rationalize and think about that is the overlapping kind of S-curves of growth. Because, where we're at kind of scale, right? From startup to growth to scale mode. With different sort of behavioral profiles, operating profiles, things to do. We're at scale with our U.S. direct, inside SaaS business, right? Inbound marketing, all that. Where we hadn't kind of figured this out was, Europe, enterprise, certainly federal, right? Like more public sector folks.
Outbound channels were all new investments.
Yeah. And so there was a layering of that stuff we need to do. But there was also this reflection of, one of the ways that we would do that would be to... There's a lot of routes to success for startup talents, for people in the company. Sometimes they'll go through the linear sort of like, IC, manager, director, VP, whatever, executive. But sometimes, it's sort of like working across, because often, startup folks who are really happy dealing with the chaos. So, startup journeys, they're great at that stage, but not great as operators, right? Just doing incremental stuff or optimizing later, or managing sort of, large teams, or through, a first and second and third line management. And so So again, it was one of the big bets that we did make was to send this fellow, Patrick, over there because he's a startup guy through and through. He will always be the 0 to 1. And, he was a good culture booster as we carried over to Europe. It's just that he himself was sort of unprepared because I think it was the first time in Europe. And he, living there.
It was like a double culture shock. Importing culture, flashing culture, like different culture.
But founders are always like, hey, I've got this early team and they're like not making it to the next level. I feel like they're getting left behind. Do I fire them? What do I do? And it's like, you just have to find new projects for them to work on. You got to find the new initiatives that are that 0 to 1 where they're awesome at that. And you can't always expect them to grow to the kind of scalar or growth phases.
So different place where the geographic expansion really, much better than we ever would have imagined was actually Austin. As we kind of outscaled, Ann Arbor's, available commercial real estate or even its residential, we needed to figure out where else to expand. And so we opened that office in Austin, but sending a bunch of people. It was like a whole crew, like a welcome crew from Duo here down there who liked kind of the early kind of build and could be the sort of microcosm, right, of all the functions represented. Because we didn't really think of these offices as like a sales office, whatever. They were sort of,
like the everything office, like all the functions.
Yeah. And so that's what it was. And, I remember when we opened up a 30-person office there during Austin Startup Week, right, for an open house, right, for people to come through. 3,000 people came through. It was crazy, and in large part, we had, these cultural ambassadors did such a good job kind of finding, rooting themselves in the community, really being great, not just brand ambassadors, but helping to build, like Jon Oberheide doing all these like tech talks here, right, in all the community. And that translated very well down in Austin. And, so anyway, so, I think the important thing here is that when you build something to scale, it doesn't have to just be that you're now this giant corporate entity, but you can be sort of fractal, right, in this kind of startup way where you have like pods and teams, and the engineering team was managed the same way, where you had like pods that were also cross function of a designer, a security engineer, developers, a product manager, and so in John's role, where we're in product and engineering, they were kind of creating kind of like whole teams kind of unto themselves that could operate independently. They didn't have to raise something up through the leadership team to get something done. They could just actually execute. Kind of like just this 2-pizza rule or whatever, I guess. But
yeah, I was going to say, that's what it reminds me of. It's just like the small team.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think I might know what this means, but I don't know for sure. There's a saying, say no to dope.
Say no to dope was what we described with the on-premise. Duo on-premise enterprise was our acronym for Duo in a box.
So you just like say no to on-prem. It's basically that's where that comes
That's
from.
where it ended up. Yeah.
Okay.
We said maybe at first, and then we, Stratton helped clarify. You should say no.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe, I guess I missed the timing on that question, but I just thought that was hilarious it's a great
Don't do dope.
line. Yeah. And then you played a role sort of in the SolarWinds, the very high profile SolarWinds.
Yeah.
Like what was Duo's kind of like relation?
Yeah. I don't think that was ever fully disclosed.
Yeah, I couldn't find it. I was like,
on the internet. So SolarWinds, there was the company SolarWinds. They sell like network management products. And there was this probably one of the most significant breaches in history of a supposedly Russian state actor broke into SolarWinds, backdoored their product, and then all of these SolarWinds deployments across the internet, federal government, enterprises, with a backdoor into those networks.
And SolarWinds was a security company, right?
Yeah, security, network management.
Yeah, in SolarWinds, we had some earlier kind of connection too, because Kenny Van Zandt, who was the president and CEO at the time, who later went on to become the president and CEO of
Asana,
thank you. Asana. But Kenny had a really, he was growth hacker kind of fellow, but he was one of the guys we also sort of took some cues from is when SolarWinds built their product, they're focused on what he called the wow moment or something. The golden motion, he called it. Sort of the tipping point between marketing and sales, where again, it's the product kind of value that leads you through it. And so, when they showed up at trade shows, they would just have demo booths and pull people in and say, hey, you want to see something? I was like, well, what? No, come, just put your hand on the mouse, check this out.
Mm-hmm.
And then within 30 seconds of them sort of playing with the product, like, whoa, this is actually really interesting. Like, tell me more. That insight was a large part of it. And also some of the things that we actually did with Duo, right? Our trade shows kind of had similar demo booths with not a lot of marketing around them, right? And all that kind of thing. But so we felt bad when that happened at SolarWinds because we knew Kenny, we knew the journey they'd been on.
This was like worst case incident. It was like Russia was in U.S. Treasury, email systems was in.
Yeah. Careful what you say.
Everything.
Yeah, we
across highly sensitive organizations, and they also were going after security companies. So they had compromised Mandiant, which is a kind of security incident response company that eventually got bought by Google. While the attackers were sort of exploring, trying to move laterally within Mandiant's network, who was a Duo customer, they logged into an account that was protected with Duo, which set off some red flags within Mandiant. Mandiant ended up catching that intruder, tracing it back to the SolarWinds, software, discovering that SolarWinds was backdoored, and then exposed this, sort of worldwide compromise.
This was the point of some of the interaction that, Jono and team had designed into the Duo app, which is that you could report fraud, right? If it wasn't you logging in, it's like, no, that's not me. That becomes positive signal, right? To a security team saying like, actually, wait a second. Like our entire user base was just basically been deputized, right? As security, monitors, right? Personnel for our organization. See something, say something. And that's what happened. And so again, there were a number of incidents like that where, Duo was sort of the canary in the coal mine, the bellwether for kind of what happened, uncovering some larger breaches. But yeah, that was, happened a lot, but maybe not the scale that SolarWinds was at.
Yeah.
And I think I saw that you burned only $14 million to get to $100 million. ARR.
Yeah.
Like that's,
I think that was, there's a lot like,
we overraised, but
yeah. We raised more money than we needed. Should have done a stock buyback. I mean, we thought we were growing quickly. Like we did a T3, D2, tripled 3 times and doubled twice. And like that was, kind
that was really good.
SaaS metrics. The other side of the story was we were doing that while being close to, we were cash flow positive for a couple of years of that.
Yeah.
And so I think, even now that's like a T3, D2 is like, oh, that's cute in the world of, AI.
Like VCs will like get on and be like, I would triple every month.
Yeah. If you haven't gone from 0 to 100 in less than 12 months, then you're not a real company anymore.
Yeah.
But if you look at the other side, so the bottom line efficiency, I think that's a place where we were really special in terms of the, sort of net burn to get to 100 million. We still like
Tomasz, I think Tomasz Tenguz wrote about this early about Redpoint, but we were the best SaaS metrics he's ever seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What were the metrics? I think you sent in an email like a summary. What was like the general like?
I mean, we had in the growth, we had that T3, D2. I think we burned 8 million of capital to get to 100, and maybe burned like 20 million at the time of exit overall.
Yeah, it was like 1, 3, 10, 30, 75, 140 something, 200 something in our ARR. But the burn ultimately was very low. I think it was about 14 to get to by the time we were about 100.
But you weren't trying to be cash flow positive in those years. It was our own fault. We grew faster than we expected. And we couldn't hire enough. We couldn't hire fast enough to hit our hiring plans.
Yeah, our plans were always to actually,
burn more,
spend more. Yeah. But the other part of it is, part of that was we raised later rounds with, Lead Edge Capital, Meritech, the growth investors kind of as a mezzanine to what we've been in our IPO. And some of that was because, strategically we had been doing things internally in the team looking at, well, what could we do to do inorganic growth, or because we have friends who had great companies and we even had like a target company we were looking to buy. And I remember having this conversation with Jeff Lawson, who was very helpful from Twilio about what he had done, en route to their IPO, which is tank up 100 million in cash on the balance sheet to go, experiment and gain some experience doing this before you try to acquire the public eye, right, as a public company. And so those were lessons we had taken because we had well over 100 million cash on the balance sheet when we exited. Which is to say that we didn't need to raise that additional money. We never touched it, but it's fine because it was also cheaper.
It's always that balance of, we would walk into the board meetings and we'd have done our 3x or we'd overachieved our, first half plan or something like that. And of course, as board members would say, why can't you grow faster? And we'd sit there and we're like, I don't think we can. And I remember Zach, our COO, had a slide with a roller coaster loop to loop and like people falling out of the roller coaster. And that's how it felt. Like we were trying to grow responsibly without doing a bunch of dumb stuff. Like we certainly could have pulled more marketing levers, but we didn't have ones that we didn't think were wildly inefficient.
It was also, I mean, we were pretty explicit with the team because the team would ask these questions too, like, and we were also open book, right, about all this stuff. We had, some of our management systems were sort of funny, but we had a board report we did before every board meeting, before every mid-quarter board call, where every one of our, VPs would write 3 to 5 paragraphs of plans, progress, and problems of their function. I'd write sort of a preamble about the kind of story of the business in that time frame. And we share that with the board for comment and also calibration ahead of every board meeting. So we don't spend the time just doing the weather report off the slides, but, really focus on 2 or 3 topics of strategic concern that we had and they had. But also we'd share it with the entire company. And so they all knew kind of how we were investing for the money, where our kind of growth was coming from, what our big bets were and why. And some of our most insight, our CFO thought it was so funny that some of our most insightful SaaS metric questions would come from guys like Martin Thoburn, one of our video, sort of engineers, right? And all this stuff.
If like a software engineer is like, Paul, can you tell us why the CAC ratio changed for the mid-market segment, last quarter? And Paul would be like, I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah, it was kind of ridiculous, but it's still, we loved it that people were sort of deep that way.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, as we're kind of building this all out and together with the team and kind of looking at all these kind of things, the one thing we said we would never break, which would be our culture. The governing factor, kind of limiting our growth, was cultural coherence. Mm-hmm. And not that we need to hire for people for cultural fit, because we always talk about hiring people for cultural contribution, all the kind of things. But what we weren't willing to risk was the worst outcome that I'd ever seen of startups, right? When you have people running around not knowing what they're supposed to be doing.
Oh, so just just causing chaos, probably.
They're lost. There's no one to like point them in the right direction. There's no way to like hopefully all of your employees are like roughly pointed in the right direction. Obviously there's some natural variation, but
we saw that some of our customers, frankly, right? As they were hyperscaling, growing much faster than us. I remember we had a funny question during one of our board meetings from our team about on the firing of Travis Kalanick, right? Mm-hmm. From Uber. By our board, by our board members, right?
Yeah. Oh, so there was like concern is like, will you guys get fired?
Yeah. There's this question like, so how do we point him, to me like, so Doug, how do you feel about having an investor who just fired, portfolio CEO, right? And I was like, well, I know them well. I know exactly what happened to the extent that they can share it because the holder report at Uber never was published, thankfully for them, but as our board member, Matt Kohler, got tagged in by Bill Gurley, right, to go, you deal this with now, right? And Matt, was, and we would buy drinks for him after his board meetings. I was like, I'm proud of the fact that we have an investor for whom, there are more ways a company can fail than just financial, but also, moral and ethical. And so the fact that they've taken sort of care to kind of do this, because there were lots of reports of things that were like really deeply disturbing that were happening at Uber. That, again, move fast and break things, sure. But when you have some of the disclosures that were happening of like, sexual assault or abuse, all these things, you're like, that's never going to be on us. We're never going to suffer that kind of thing. That's not what we built an organization, right? That's never going to be on our conscience or our responsibility. We care for, again, the broader journeys that our people and teams have with us than just what happens at work. And so anyway, so I was proud of that fact that we had ethical, investors and all that kind of thing. At the same time, I questioned, so why are you guys invested in Snap when like Evan's like, we're never going to IPO, or we're never going to make a profit.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, they did.
That's on that note. I think probably the craziest line was a couple of years ago with OpenAI. Sam Altman in an interview, a journalist was like, so how is this OpenAI nonprofit thing going to make money? And I think he said, the AI will figure out how to make money or something. Yeah. And this was like 5 years ago, right. 6 years ago.
It's always a great product pitch when you're like, if our product succeeds, there won't be a need for money.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then I think, so What is the scale of Duo today? Like I know if you look at Cisco's earnings page, I think the security line is like 2.1 billion in revenue, and like
no,
that might be quarterly.
It might be quarterly.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's more than that.
Maybe that was a quarter.
They don't break out Duo, they don't break out SaaS, but it's it's a billion plus ARR now. And
John left, I think, 2 years earlier than I did from Cisco. But even that time frame that I was there, we had doubled the global security business there, right? But it was no surprise. And I think, it was in all the earnings calls. So, Duo was the fastest growing business not just in Cisco security, but in Cisco.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, fastest growing one.
For all 4 years straight. And so, we did a lot there, I just say.
Yes, it's kind of fun, even though we're both not involved anymore. There's not that many, SaaS companies that have reached the $1 billion ARR milestone. Maybe like, I don't know, 30, 40. I'm not sure. But 100,000 customers across all industries, organizations, shapes, and sizes. It's fun to see the company and the team succeed well beyond our individual tenures there.
And Cisco almost didn't acquire you. Like, wasn't there's like some false starts?
Cisco
What's the extent?
Almost acquired us, and then almost didn't acquire us, and then almost acquired us, and almost didn't.
No. They didn't really acquire us. They made a bid, and we're like, no, that number is like not even the zip code. But they made overtures and so forth, and
they had interest for a couple of years at least.
And then they ended up paying like 3 times more than they originally.
More than double.
We had corp dev exercise in like 2016, 2017, and there were a bunch of folks around the table. But this was, the price tag at that point was like 700-800 million range. And we actually signed a LOI, surprisingly, with Workday, which is, a little bit out there in terms of product strategy.
HR.
Your HRIS, which is really your ground truth of, identity.
Yeah.
And that flowing down into Duo to kind of apply security controls. It was an interesting strategy. I don't think the go-to-market would have worked given Workday's like heavy enterprise customer base and our broad market applicability. But that deal fell apart a couple days before we were supposed to sign the merger agreement and announce. And in hindsight, that was a really good thing. Because instead of selling for 750, 800, I don't remember what the price tag was.
No, it started with a 1, but it started with a 1. But even then, it was something that our board was sort of like, why you have to train now? You guys, because we were continuing to double the business, right? And that's kind of what happened between the year in which Cisco kind of made the offer and then actually consummated one.
I give a lot of credit to Matt Kohler that when we first brought him, one of the offers in that go round, Matt said, you're not worth, 800, you're worth at least 2 billion. And we're like, oh, that's cute, Matt. Like, thanks for the feedback. We understand you've got this amazing portfolio with Uber and Snap and all these things. We only got portfolio one. And then sure enough, 12, 18 months later, we came back with an offer from Cisco that was around 2 plus.
Yeah.
And Matt said, you're not worth 2 billion. You're worth 10. We're like, oh. Like, Matt, you were right last time, but this time I don't think you're right. But, in reality, if we had kept going, especially in the height of 2021, the public markets.
I don't talk about it. I don't talk about it. It was only a couple of years ago that I finally put this one away. Put it under my,
no regrets category.
Yeah, I just got it on my site.
Yeah,
but it's fine. Yeah, but it was it was at the time the largest multiple ever paid for a private stock acquisition. The Catalyst folks would know. It also was followed by others that kind of superseded it, right?
GitHub, I think.
Yeah,
MuleSoft. There were some big ones after that.
Right.
It was like 2.1 billion. Is that the number? Am I remembering right?
2.4, depending how you count it.
2.35 was the way that they like to count it, but it was the total was more because we kept our cash.
Oh, got it. Okay,
so
makes sense. What all did you learn after the acquisition? So you guys mentioned some things about like enterprise go to market, people staying at Cisco. Like what was kind of the lessons you guys learned?
I think you learned a lot of lessons of just things that we took for granted in terms of like that staying close to the customer, that customer exposure. You go into Cisco Megacorp, and I don't want to pick on Cisco because it's true of many large organizations.
Yeah,
where you just don't have the exposure to the customer. Your engineers are not on calls with customers. They're not interfacing with the end users of your product. And, just understanding why startups win so frequently, because they have that pace of innovation, that sort of rapid decision-making cycle.
Yeah, it's also just a matter of scale too. I think that Cisco, as being a hardware company, really dominated, the obviously that market, right?
I think it was like there was so much effort put on when you're inside an organization like that. There's so much where you're kind of working in the business as opposed to like on the business or with customers, where so much of time is dedicated to, are you managing within 5% of your monthly OpEx envelope? Are you, preparing for the QBR? Are you making the business case for your new asks for the next fiscal year? And you just kind of lose that sense of like, what are we doing every single day that's building value for the customers? You can kind of get insulated within the big organization. On the plus side, Cisco is, the best description I heard is it's a carrier strike fleet. Like, it is slow. It is massive coordination across not a aircraft carrier, but an entire, platoon, flotilla of boats. If you can move that and send it to the destination, craft it to your desires, you have unstoppable power. Like, if you can take that massive go-to-market machine of 300,000 sellers, both direct and through their channel, then you will just grind away at that market over time. But you have to invest for that long term. It's not like, hey, we make a decision and then we're going to go do this tomorrow. It's like, how do we influence the system and organization to get the recurring offer component of the, general AM's, comp plan for the next year to favor a SaaS product or favor a security product. It's those kind of long-term influence operations.
So they were probably all set up around like just selling routers to people every whatever period. And then you have to figure out like, okay, well, there's like some software that
you're a Cisco AM and you wake up, you say, what am I going to talk? I got 200 products. What am I going to talk about with my customer today? They have a $10 million Catalyst switch refresh that they need to buy. I'm going to focus on that.
Yeah.
This $200K Duo deal, like, maybe they need some MFA, but I'm going to close this $10 million deal. Maybe I'll tack on some security along the way. And so those were sort of the structural challenges when you're going into a bigger company. And that's not just a security company. And that's not just a SaaS or software company.
And if they build other emotions and sometimes real understanding, respect for the opportunity. Like, I remember we had a later independent board member we recruited, Hillary Copeland McAdams, who was the president of Salesforce. But before that, she led the build of Oracle Direct at Oracle, something that Larry Ellison was like, I don't think this is going to work, and I don't know if I really even want to do this. But it's become like a third of his business, right?
What is it?
Oracle Direct, basically all their direct SaaS business and so forth, and other.
So like all the software.
All the software, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so sometimes we kind of learned is that our experience, and again, for any founders looking at kind of large company kind of acquirers, right, to merge with, there's kind of three ways that goes. It's either sometimes their way, right, as you're assimilated into the Borg. Sometimes it's your way, where you're so peculiar that they don't know what to do with you, and you sort of stay independent business unit, and they never really sort of get the benefit, right, of why they acquired you. Except everything's just harder for everybody. And then the third way, which is what we really pursued, which is it's truly an integration, right? It's not our way, it's not your way. It's a third way we need to come up together, right? And someone coming with fresh eyes, coming with some of the old eyes, experience, success, scale, but finding the intersection of that is a lot of work, but it's very intensive in terms of people. Like we spent so much of our time with our early journey and integration of having our leaders spend all this time with all of Cisco's corresponding leaders. Like to the point that our head of security became the head of security for all of Cisco, right? And later GitHub and now GM. but we spent a lot of time elevating our leaders, not sort of forcefully into positions of kind of a control or anything like that, but giving them sort of the platform within the business, within broader Cisco, to really kind of have influence, right? And help pull together and kind of a shared platform of learning where, a design community came out of kind of Duo coming into Cisco, partnering with all the other kind of design leadership, but then actually having a again, established kind of a culture, right, of how we did this stuff. That again, other design leaders there could finally feel like they could plug into and we could build something larger, right, for Cisco from. And so there are a lot of these kind of things that, we were really proud to be able to contribute. But, at the end of the day, once that all was done, like Jello says, our job was to obsolete ourselves.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. And it's, there's a lot of puts and takes with going into a big company like Cisco, but there was, the people were excellent. And we would come in and say, I remember walking in and being like, hey, so what's Cisco's zero trust strategy? Like, this is kind of what we're doing. How do we fit in? And, the leaders were very open. They're like, we don't have one. That's why we bought you. We paid $2.4 billion for a zero trust strategy. You guys tell us what to do. And that was certainly refreshing of coming in and not saying this is the way we do things, but being open to how do we duoize Cisco in the right places and how do we Ciscoize Duo?
Were you able to suss that out ahead of time, or was it just complete luck that it turned out that way?
Yeah. I wouldn't say, I don't think
there's no
can
easy
suss that out.
There's no easy path to it. Once it was like, day one or day zero, or it was a lot of scrambling quickly. Like, let's meet each other, let's do all this stuff. But
everyone wants to touch and feel the shiny new object, and there you get outreach from 70,000 employees. And, thank you.
Oh,
but they were very welcoming in that way, and also different than what we've seen other companies do. Like when Palo Alto acquires companies, they sort of just rip the face off of the products. They just slap them right behind kind of Panorama. They kind of have this force. I mean, they have a dedicated integration engineering team where it's like, yes, you have engineers, but we have ours, and we're going to take your code and figure out how that's just slot into what we do. And so it's just there's different ways different companies do it. Cisco it felt like more like welcome to the tribe kind of thing.
Yeah. Spend the time to understand our business and what makes us tick, and us spend the time to figure out theirs. So in hindsight, I think it was the right home for the business for the long term.
Yeah. And I think long term, like Doug, before we started recording, you're talking a lot about you're really focused on Michigan now. You're really excited about doing stuff. Like, what are you up to day to day now?
Post Cisco, I was there for quite some time, but in the last 3 years, I've been traveling to 22 countries, sort of, getting kind of all this out of my system. Not doing a lot in security. John has been doing a lot more in security, I think.
Yeah, you're on some boards. You're telling me about all these different products.
But by and large, trying to family foundation. But we established a family office to try to help strengthen and serve the communities we're part of, mostly here in Southeast Michigan. So between Ann Arbor, Detroit, but up to Flint. But it's tech, in a nutshell, it's tech, media, and real estate, but in a way that we think we can combine, because Michigan is so rich in all these forms of capital, like obviously intellectual capital, our own research universities, human capital, right? Just amazing kind of talent and just work ethic and all this kind of stuff. Physical capital, particularly in Detroit, where we have all these amazing buildings and all this kind of stuff that's been built for a city for 2 million people, but it has 600,000 left in it. A lot of financial capital. Actually, Michigan's still one of the richest places in terms of individual wealth. A lot of old money that's here from what had been the second wealthiest, kind of city in America and all this. But and a lot of cultural capital, right? So certainly, right? But, this place represents from, birthplace of punk rock with Iggy Pop in Ann Arbor to Detroit Rock City and, Motown and techno and jazz and all the things. But I think the thing that's sort of we're really focused on is the social capital. How do we intersect these things and build more opportunities for folks to come together, to co-invest, to build upon these forms of capital so we create shared prosperity in a broader way? Because that's a lot of what we saw coming, past Duo. Ann Arbor is very successful. Ann Arbor, we were the first unicorn. We were the first multi-billion-dollar tech exit in Michigan. There have been 12 more since. In fact,
wow, I did not. That's way bigger than I would have thought.
Yeah. In fact, my neighbor sold her company, last fall, just a couple of months ago. I walked my dog with her in our neighborhood. I didn't know she had a company. She sold for $2.2 billion, right? At Histosonics, right? And I was like, Jen, you didn't tell me you had a company. And she's like, well, I didn't think you'd be interested. It's like life science. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is, but it's a lot like that. And even beyond that, there's so many more. You have just amongst its graduates, it's had 46 unicorn founders, but only 3 of them, the only 3 of those companies represented actually stayed.
Yeah.
We were the first.
PitchBook data is pretty crazy. U of M is the, I think, 7th or 8th biggest educational institution worldwide. We're tied with like Tel Aviv University for producing founders that go on to create venture-backed tech startups.
And so I just think this is like it's not a missed opportunity, but it's just tremendous opportunity. So I guess I still don't like to talk. That's why I'm so quiet. You don't see me doing a lot of stuff publicly because I'm just like, this is great. Like, there's a lot of great companies and opportunities for us to get into.
Only here, exclusive to the Peel.
Yeah.
A lot of secrets exposed here. Yeah, I think I saw that Michigan has a top 5 business and engineering school. And it's like the only college. I mean, some of these rankings, who knows how they do them.
And it's incredible. It's like top 10 programs in like 100 plus
different like schools like nursing or information systems or insert.
The breadth and the diversity of excellence is wild.
But we just have to do more because we've also realized that keeping it secret this way means that we stay more siloed, which means that there's not the flywheel, right, of reinvestment. Like we just had another fellow just, last month. So Jim Scappa sold Altair Engineering for $10 billion in Troy, right? John's hometown, just a couple of months ago.
What was the company called?
Altair Engineering.
To that point, I've never heard of it. I don't even.
Similar, any mechanical engineer in the world knows it. It's simulation software for aerospace, for automotive, for anything advanced manufacturing. Sold to Siemens, and I think he's in Atherton, California now, but he's a University of Michigan tier born grad.
And was it OneStream that just I think went private for $6 billion?
Yeah, OneStream.
It's also like kind of like HR software. No, it's accounting. Yeah. I have a friend who used to work there. It was like owned by KKR, I think, bottom owned. And did they go public or
I think they went public and they got taken private?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. So that was, Tom Shea's a great heads down entrepreneur, but again, sort of like, I was on one podcast with him and I haven't seen him since. And it's a lot of the stuff is like that, right? Where we have all this great sort of things happening. And now we need to talk more about it, and sort of like connect more of the dots and stuff.
Especially the founders that are, coming out of the university and just allow them to understand that there is a path if they want to stay here. I think of Ethan Gibbs from Embedder, who was, I think, a sophomore, junior, started I guess you'd call it cursor for embedded hardware development, won a pitch competition in school, decided to move out to the Valley, got into YC, raised a great seed round. But the reason he left was he's like, all of my customers are in San Francisco. Like it's software city. That's why I would go there. And, we need to show that there's a paved path that if you do want to stay here, if you want to build a different kind of company, that you're not taking on a huge other chunk of risk in addition to the risk inherent in building a startup.
Yeah. But also this part is also just selling the place, we invest in another company in John's hometown in Troy, Viscom.ai, which is like an automotive engineer who worked at Honda and his co-founder, and he moved out to San Francisco for Nat Friedman's thing. AI grant, did that whole thing. And he's like, hey, I kind of like it out here. I'm going to stick it out. And, like, no. And then his co-founder is like, yeah, Kaylee. He's like, yeah, I'm going to move out there too. I'm like, no, like, dude, like, why? Because their customers are here.
Yeah.
Their customers are automotive and, all this. It's like, and granted, they raised like a 20 million, seed round or whatever. So they're great. But, like I say, you need a little bit of Silicon Valley in you, but you have to leverage what's strategic, about where you are. And I just think it's kind of nuts to try to build, it's hard to build optionality for companies, even in AI, out in the Valley when, talent's so expensive and, the valuations are so crazy. And, I don't know. And our advice, I think, both to founders always has been like maintain optionality. Don't, because like you say, like John said, you have one portfolio company, right?
Yeah.
And all those rounds of financing, the 1-on-4, the 5-on-20, we could have pushed more. We could have pushed for higher valuations and less dilution, but we didn't want to paint ourselves into a corner.
Yeah, don't ride over the top, right? Don't block yourself out from the things that could happen next.
And if things go well, it's not going to matter.
Right. And it's as you know, startups are binary outcomes, right? So
I'm very jealous of Doug's placemaking, particularly here in Southeast Michigan, because my scope is all over the place, working with startups in San Francisco, Austin, DC, funded mostly through board service, like trying to work with, I think back at the different phases of Duo and that, kind of years of hypergrowth from 10 million ARR to 100 was the most fun and chaotic. And that's where I like to work with companies now. Like I'm not useful in 0 to 1. Like I'm not going to tell you what to build or how to build it. Like go talk to your customers.
Yeah.
1 to 10 is kind of interesting as you start some commercialization, distribution. But I think the fun, meaty, kind of softer challenges of 10 to 100 are where founders need to go from that. You can sell 10 million of anything. And once you get to there, you kind of got to throw out most of your practices, all the things you do that don't scale to get you to 10 million. You got to figure out a set of different tactics for that next order of magnitude.
And also level up as a leader, which is always, that's hard. Yeah. Founders need friends. And again, that's one of the biggest challenges you have here is they don't have enough of density sometimes for folks like to feel like they belong. Like they see like, founders want to be where founders are.
Yeah.
And again, there's not as many here, but that's why we have like Michigan Founders Fund, which is kind of created somewhat artificial, but, geographically unbounded, community of those kind of founders here. But increasingly, to be honest with you, that's why we're doing real estate. I don't really want to buy hotels or, do neighborhood scale development, but
creates center of gravity.
Yeah. But we have to create the kind of place and product. Detroit needs to create the product for scaling companies want to be. The nice thing is that there's a whole category of them that are all fighting to sort of come here, which are all the industrial companies, right? Anyone building anything that needs a factory, they come here like, oh my God, like you have factories coming out of your ears and you have the talent for it, more importantly. And so that's the thing that we sort of need to kind of pair up and see. But, we have companies like Remora, right? Like Paul Gross came here from YC and built like this amazing business that has like, 9 figures of off day doing like carbon capture out of like trucks and trains. But he's not from here. He's like, no, this is the best place to build my business. And, he's doing it here and there's more of that coming. So the other thing I'll say is that, also whether it's for, direct investments and working with founders or whether it's with like, LPs, Michigan is also kind of a sleeper kind of thing. Obviously, you need different kind of work to get either sort of over the line, right? Here where sometimes people aren't as oriented here, but there's great family offices, great institutional LPs here. They're great founders that, but sometimes what they're doing, I got to wrap my head around, like you're doing mushroom what? Are you doing like,
Wait, what is the mushroom? What's the mushroom one?
Oh,
psychedelics?
No, it's a cool one. There's one that's doing, it's actually a tech transfer. It's out of, not even from here, but out of University of Minnesota. They're applying, and they have a SIBR with DoD for Army-based kind of PFAS remediation, but they use fungi to do PFAS remediation.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Like in the ground, sucking it up out of the ground.
Yeah. It's cool stuff.
PFAS is like that forever chemical that just gets in your body, never goes away.
That's now part of our food pyramid, apparently. The way that we're going.
Minimize your consumption, of course, right?
Yeah.
That's, the university environment is so much deep tech, climate tech, hard tech, pharma, medical devices. It's incredible to see what comes out of there. It's not a lot of SaaS because you don't really need, if you want to build some software, just go build some software. But to see the pipeline reports coming out of University of Michigan and other universities is awesome.
Yeah. So I'm meeting people here. I'm like, wait a second. Because someone once told me, I'll just go invest in some Chinese biotech ETFs. They'll be good. And then I looked and who's doing them. And I'm like, wait, there's the dude here who, with my friend, has taken 4 of these companies public in Hong Kong. The most recent, which is like $4 billion. And they live in Ann Arbor. I'm like, wait a second. Like, what are we doing here? Like, so I'm like begging this guy, please kind of get into your company. He's like, no, we're funding it our own, like 20 million until we get to a point of like 100 million valuation. Then we're going to go out. I was like, please, let me get in this damn thing. And I'm trying to find I hired a guy who can do like life sciences coming from a different family office doing this stuff. So for me, it's been like all this. Like I like feeling like a beginner again, like not, and learning all that stuff from the ground up and navigating it. But it's been really fun because we have, other things we have from our experiences and networks and access to bring to bear to them. But it's really fun to do in the context of a community, right? Where we're going to build together here and stuff.
So did you wish there was more of that in Ann Arbor or in Southeast Michigan? Or
we always did when we were doing it. Yeah. And that's why this exists, we helped Bamboo expand from Detroit here and then Grand Rapids and Royal Oak and so forth. The co-working space that we're sitting in, we've been doing real estate. We're the real estate partner for. But, I don't know, yes, I've gotten comfort with, and also a lot of interest in real estate, particularly now, is, if it's not gold, if it's not crypto, you need some assets.
Hard assets, yeah.
You need some hard assets right now.
We need more GPs. We need more, emerging VCs and solo GPs like Turner Novak.
I got to convince more people. We all got to convince more people to move here.
We got Blake Rausch, Southeast Michigan with Hidden.
Roger Ehrenberg back here.
Yeah. Game Changers, yeah.
Starting a movement. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Cool. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for taking the time to do this.
Thanks, Turner.
Thanks, Turner. Love what you're doing, and love that you are doing it here.
You almost need to find people who have like a weird bias to Michigan of like, my family's here, or like my customers are here. Like, that's specifically why I would stay here. Because like for me, it's
here, have some sort of ties, but then you still have to show them that it can be done. There's supportive infrastructure around you. There's a path, but there's stories that you've heard.
But it just depends. Like, I remember when I met Alex Wong from Topiary Capital and realized that, he's been my neighbor for like 3 years down the street, but not realizing he was managing director of Intel Capital, not realizing that, he has all this money he's raised from his time at, 15 years he led D.E. Shaw, right? And all the dude's here, and he's like doing this stuff on his own, and he's only here because he wants to raise his kids here and like thinks it's a great place to do so, and all this kind of stuff. He has no connection to Michigan. Yeah. I'm like, it's just weird, right? Yeah. Like there's like these sleeper kind of folks throughout here. As a founder we just talked about earlier, I'll mention this because I don't want anyone else going for him to invest in. But like, like there's some like amazing, world-class talent all just like doing their thing, and no one knows. It's like, and so it's fun to uncover this.
I think some of that is Ann Arbor is such high sort of talent density, like super educated. Everyone's like way overqualified for everything. And so, you throw a rock and you hit like 10 super qualified people, and you might not know in depth what each of their, areas of expertise are, or what they might have done in the past. And
so the open, invitation will be that if there are any funds out there that want to do this, because we host this stuff all the time, tours, right, of folks come through Ann Arbor and Detroit. Whether it's for tech investing, whether it's for art collecting, whether it's for, other stuff, we're happy to sort of get people sort of plugged into kind of the ecosystem that does exist here. And again, now increasingly, there are going to be some places like again, I think we're going to be at a point pretty soon where if any VC wants to have like a temporary office, like if they want to work from Detroit, I've got multiple buildings they can do that from. We can kind of help set that up and just, help create more of that opportunity.
There's more like scout programs and sort of incubators that are being set up, particularly around the university, where there's so much like untapped pipeline that is not maybe fully exploring like research commercialization. So there's some folks that are setting up programs here where they're getting first looks at the pipeline coming out of the university. But it is more specialized expertise than just, technology and software.
Nice. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for
thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening. Thanks again to Numeral and Flex for supporting this episode. Put your sales tax on autopilot at numeral.com and upgrade to Flex Elite to get $1,000 on your first card using code Turner at the waitlist link in the description. If you like this conversation, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll promise to stop suggesting you name things after me. Somebody change that. If you missed it, make sure to check out the back catalog of over 100 episodes. Tune in over the next few weeks for guests that include Gary Tan at YC, Chetan Pudigante at Benchmark, Jake Stoke at Serval, Mike and Nikhil at Footwork, and Scott Stevenson at Spellbook, one of the fastest growing startups in Canada. If you don't want to miss any of these, subscribe to my newsletter, The Split, linked in the description, to get each episode plus the transcript emailed directly to your inbox every week. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.